Hi, and welcome to the Healthcare CEO Show, where you'll find actionable insights on healthcare leadership from the best and brightest in the industry. I'm your host, Daniel Fernandez. Let's get a pulse. On this season of the show, we're taking a closer look at the intersection of M&A and healthcare. And my job as host is to bring you the industry's top executives, get them to share some of their most valuable insights. This is an episode you don't want to miss. Joining me today, I have Graham Young. He is a Senior Vice President in charge of M&A and Business Transformation for US Orthopaedic Partners. Graham, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Daniel.
Now, before we get started, let's talk about how you even got into M&A. Most kids, when they're growing up, want to be astronauts and firefighters. And I imagine when you were a kid, you didn't wake up one day and think, M&A, that's where I want to be as a kid, right?
Yeah. I did not. I was interested in healthcare, though. Wanted to become a physician, a pediatric surgeon, actually. And out of college, took the MCATs a couple of times, and God had other plans for me based on some of my MCAT scores. And that led me into working for Johnson & Johnson, and worked for J&J in a variety of roles for 15 years in strategy and negotiation, ASC development, and then in the early stages was carrying the bag, was a sales rep.
Nice.
Got to interact with physicians and specifically on the orthopedic side. And in 2019, I was recruited by the Thurston Group. They're out of Chicago. They were interested in starting an orthopedic platform. At the time, we had, maybe nationally, there were 3 orthopedic platforms, so relatively new or very new in the space. And so joined up with them, thought it was an excellent opportunity, and worked with Thurston in a variety of roles, sort of learning the business. To me, that the quote M&A side, the P&L side's a little easier. The valuation side's a little easier than actually understanding the physician and being able to have those conversations. And so picked up on that and moved into going out trying to build an orthopedic platform, trying to find that platform group.
Now, tell us a little bit about how US Orthopaedic Partners has evolved over the last handful of years to what it's doing today.
Yeah, so US Orthopaedic Partners is a majority physician-owned and physician-led management service organization. We have 2 financial sponsors, FFL out of San Francisco and the Thurston Group, as I mentioned. We started the platform with Mississippi Sports Medicine out of Jackson, Mississippi. And the role of the MSO is providing the administrative, operational, and strategy support, back office, if you will, but also bringing together like-minded physicians. What we like to do is bring those together in a regional aspect for a variety of reasons. And then using that to create a larger brand with the smaller individual practice brand underneath that, and help take some of the burden off the physicians, right? The clinical staff, so they can provide what they train to do, which is the clinical side of things. So we've evolved, closed, and technically started in October of 2020. We're now comprised of about 300 orthopedic providers. We're across 3 states, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. About 1,700 employees within those practices, as well as our corporate office, and 55 site locations. So yeah, it's grown quickly, and really that growth occurred right out of the gate in the first 2 years or so, with our physicians helping lead the way, them knowing who they wanted to partner with, what were the groups within their state or their region that they were interested in forming an alliance with, and those were the ones that we targeted first.
And you talk about kicking things off in 2020. Those first couple of years it's pretty active in the M&A space, right?
Yeah, no. So it was sort of a dichotomy from the standpoint of you had very low interest rates. You had a land grab going on. You had sort of the uncertainty coming off of COVID. So very active M&A space, but at the same time, some of the benefit of partnering with a financial sponsor, like access to capital, was not as attractive because heard this many times. Physicians say, "Oh, we're going to build a surgery center. We can go out, get a loan ourselves, right, at very, very low rates." But it creates this sense of, or this fear of missing out, which is what I like my kids say, FOMO. And you create this environment that they want to be a part of, that they want to be a part of this vision. And you move really, really quickly. And it certainly the diligence, pre-LOI diligence, especially that we did in 21, 22, was heavily focused on the finance aspect, compliance aspect, but not as just laser focused as we are today in this environment where you're pre-LOI going through integration and understanding, upsides through integration and cultural alignment and those type of things. So there has definitely been a change, but it was a fun 2 years, and hopefully we'll get back to that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, physicians don't graduate med school with a business degree. So I would imagine that there were a lot of advantages, or there are a lot of advantages to joining, a larger platform that come with it. What are some of those, you think, biggest advantages to joining a platform versus going at it alone?
Yeah, so I think that the ability to look at data across multiple providers that look very much like you, but may do things differently. They may do things better in some aspects than other, and being able to sort of pull from those best practices. Certainly at conferences and those type of events, there's time to share that, but physicians are very guarded. And when it comes to sort of what their secret sauce is for running their practice. And when you're able to bring them together under a common ownership umbrella, and then pick from these different best practices, that could be patient access, how they bring the patient in, what is that experience like? It could be revenue cycle management. It could be running a surgery center or negotiating commercial bundles with payers. All of our practices bring a different element, which has really been what has developed USOP. USOP is nothing without the practices, right? And so really pulling all of that together from the practices, taking what works best and what has been most effective, and then rolling that back out, I've found has been really what separates the successful MSO and those that are struggling, as well as it helps attract during M&A, as well as gives the physician sort of a vision for what we're trying to create and how we're trying to create it. So we've, many of the good ideas that we've implemented, most of the good ideas we've implemented have originated out of one of our practices.
That's amazing. Now, when you're looking for new acquisitions, are there certain traits beyond financials that may be more appealing? Maybe some infrastructure components that are in place, or culture, or what are some of those things that you think would be, or that are, most appealing when evaluating new practices?
Yeah. I would start with clinical reputation. It's hard to define, right? So for us, clinical reputation is how the physicians within the organization feel about said practice. Our M&A is driven through a targeting, right, where we're sourcing the practices. A lot of that is driven out of a physician committee that I created from an M&A standpoint, where we would go to the committee hypothetically and say, we want to be in this state. We think this is the next great state. Here are the reasons why. And out of all of your contacts through societies and through your education, residency fellowships, those type things, who do we know in these groups? These are the ones that we see as having elements of successful practice, ASC, ancillaries, those type things. But clinically, which of these align most to you guys, right? Who do you want to share ownership with? And that's really where we start. We sort of give the direction, the foundation where we want to go, and then the practices that sort of look like they fit our mold, and then the final say is clinically where are those practices, and which one of these is where we're going to target.
Now, being physician-led, you're surrounded by intelligent people all the time. How do you balance empowering them with, creating some sort of guardrails, especially as you're looking to scale?
Yeah. So clinically, our practices have clinical governance board charters, allows them to make decisions that are directly clinical. Some of this for corporate practice and medicine laws in the states where that exists heavily, and others just because we think it makes good sense to allow the clinicians, not the company, to manage that. But then there's the business side. A lot of our clinicians think that they are great business people, and some of them are. But to us, business decisions being made where it may not in the T's and C's stipulate that the physicians need to be on board for business decisions to be successful. The assets are physicians, the ones that are creating the revenue, do need to be aligned and on board. And so we have a physician board. That physician board is represented by all of our practices, at least one member from all of our practices. And we meet bi-weekly, typically between an hour to 3 hours, depending on the topic, and sort of roll out different objectives, different decisions that are being made, but also allow them to have a voice in things that they are seeing on the ground that the business needs to maybe pivot and look at that. So it's a good partnership. It's a good dialogue of the committee members. And I find that they really do get into it. They really want to be a part of building this out and take ownership in that.
Now, when we're talking about growth strategies, there's typically de novo and there's acquisitions. How do you kind of balance the two as you scale, or the practices? How do they balance those two?
Yeah, so I mean, from a de novo standpoint, I think we would focus more on the ancillary side. In going about an acquisition, we're wanting to acquire a practice, and I live in Nashville. I'll just use Nashville. I personally don't think it makes a ton of sense to just, instead of acquiring a practice in Nashville, let's build a de novo practice. Let's hire in new physicians. Let's market to that. Let's try to grow that brand, right? And these brands of these practices have been in the community for 30 years, 40 years. And so that is, yes, long-term, lower cost than the acquisition, but the return on that is a lot slower as you're building that out. And so what we're look at more is where are the practices that are made up of outstanding physicians, very high clinical quality, that have just not expanded out of that 5 physician group. And they didn't think it made sense to build to have an MRI or to build an ASC, or to expand their physical therapy, because there were only 5 physicians. So with partnership in USOP, being able to grow their physician with a dedicated physician recruiter, and we have a dedicated physician recruiter, so grow the footprint and then be able to build out all the different patient access points or ancillaries across the board. So whether that's physical therapy, MRI, X-rays, or surgery centers, urgent cares, sort of building that out, and those then become our de novo bricks and mortar.
Now, the typical pathway we're familiar with are just lots of acquisitions, big brand roll up. In this instance, you've got individual brands, each with brand equity. I feel like it gives the physicians a distinct advantage in their own territories because they've established that brand equity over a potentially long period of time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if I can't handle, so sort of going back from an M&A standpoint, the selling of your practice is a very emotional process for a physician because there is no matter how established you might be as an MSO, there's the uncertainty of loss of control, the uncertainty of loss of business decision making, and one of those being what happens to our brand. I've found that probably top 3 questions and concerns were around brand. Would we be able to maintain our brand? Can we maintain our brand? How does that work? And we've always felt that where it works, right? And it has worked up to this point. We have kept the same brand of the practices we've acquired. But as things have evolved, we are looking with, again, going through physician buy-in through this, looking at areas in which we can roll under one brand that has more meaning. We're looking at this in Mississippi, for example. And when I say meaning, just more coverage across the state, more relationships, and more recognizable from a community standpoint. And then rolling under that brand. And there's a lot of synergies that go with that. I think that the longer the practice has been, and it's no accident that the practices we're looking at doing this within Mississippi were our first 3 or 4 acquisitions. So the longer you've been part of this, the more maybe trust or understanding you have in the process, and there's more willingness to do that. So I don't foresee a time in the immediate future where USOP is a brand that is recognizable in the community, but using other, larger practices within our community and then expanding that brand name to the smaller bolt-on type acquisitions throughout the state is something that we're looking to roll out in the next few months.
How important is communication in the M&A process?
Yeah. I don't think you can over communicate because every communication someone hears something a little differently. I also think that by communicating, it isn't a check mark for having accomplished global understanding of what you're trying to get across. The other party has to listen, take it in, digest it. But it does start with that. Our CEO for US Orthopaedic Partners, Steve Holtzclaw, is a physician by trade, emergency room doctor. And he was hired in to replace our previous CEO back in 2023. And it's just sort of as your platform grows, the level of the position and what you need, the qualifications changes. It's just a natural progression. And when we brought Steve in, that was one of the focuses that he had was on improving communication. So that's improving communication from what is happening at the MSO level to the physician stakeholders.
Yeah.
That's improving communication from the CEO or practice administrator at the practices to their frontline leaders, and then improving communication from frontline leaders down to their direct reports and so on and so forth. We can communicate as an MSO all day long, but if that stops with the physician or with the practice administrator, then
Yeah.
we've really not accomplished much. But give the stakeholders, but not the ones who are actually implementing the communication, the heads up. So it is, I would say, number one in running one of a roll up of this size and breadth is ensuring constant communication.
That's fantastic, and I completely agree with you. And as you kind of to your point, there's a difference between communicating and clearly communicating, and clearly you focus on clearly communicating, which does have an impact. It would be naive to think that every integration goes well. What are some of those challenges that come with integrating practices?
Yeah. So when we look at larger IT type integration, so we've recently moved all of our practice over to one EMR. Modern Medicine was the one that we moved everyone to. We just completed that project 60 days ago, and that is a tough integration process. That was something that we did not see happening in this iteration of USOP, but given interest rates and sort of where the market is, it's a good use of time to go down that process. It allows us to look at data as a whole, to have the same mapping, to be able to compare apples to apples when looking at physicians or practices or specialties. But that has been difficult. The disparate RCM systems that we have, and then being able to roll that into one RCM process is a change that takes longer to realize than I think we first anticipated. And that's, the work of the last 12 months is really starting to show now. People talk a lot about cultural alignment as being very, very important. And I agree and somewhat disagree. I think first, defining what culture are you looking to build? For us, USOP is a melting pot of cultures from all of our practices, and really existing with the first practice or two that you acquire is helping to develop what that culture looks like. But I think it's important that the culture in the city that the community is aligns with, and that patients are attracted to, and what you're able to recruit to, that still needs to stay intact the best that it can. Because you're hiring physicians to New Orleans who want to live in New Orleans. And with New Orleans comes a culture that looks a little bit different than it does in Oxford, Mississippi. But there are alignments of HR and holidays and payroll systems and those type things. Those have been relatively seamless. I think ModMed, and just the EHR integration, any physician or practice that's undergone it will tell you it is takes the life out of you.
Yeah, it's a huge undertaking for anybody, especially when you're a multi-practice location.
Yep.
Let's take out our crystal ball, so to speak. We're taking a look at USOP in the future. What does USOP look like, a handful of years from now? What does that growth trajectory look like?
Yeah, so I think starting with looking at this from an M&A standpoint, my title being M&A and business transformation. The business transformation part for me is, what do I want a platform to look like when we do M&A. And so how can I improve the platform so that it is something that I can um, sell, if you will, to
Sure.
future practices? But there's that balance between current capabilities and selling this future vision, right? And so for us, for what we're trying to sell first, and then what size we're looking to get to, but what we're trying to build and continue to improve upon, I think maybe threefold. In improving patient access, streamlining that, making it easier when patients call or when patients come to the door. Do patients feel welcomed when they walk in? Is there somebody who greets them by name? Is there a way you can use geo tracking, for example, to know what patients are in your parking lot and who's walking in, so that you can greet them like a five-star hotel would? I think that's number one. And then the process of going through check-in, we've all gone through it. Like, do we have to enter our stuff in again, even though we
Yeah.
just did this, last quarter? Um, the second would be lowering hurdles, in the relationship between the payer and the practice. We're spending an exorbitant amount of time with our staff, especially and clinical staff, going through or trying to get over some hurdles, whether that's prior authorization or denials or whatever that might be. And so that takes a toll on that clinical staff. And so trying to get them back to doing what they love to do, and using stuff like artificial intelligence to help us along that pathway. And then three, really using data where we can optimize what a physician, orthopedic physician, subspecialize it even, looks like. What does best look like? When at one point in your career should you hire a mid-level? What is the balance in your early stage career between new patients and established patients? And what does that look like later? And how should you transition that? What marketing looks like? Who should we market to? Do we even know what our patient's profile looks like? And does that match the patients we actually are looking to bring in? If we're looking to bring in a lot of sports type stuff, but all we do is market to a 65 and older population, we're not really aligned with what our expertise is and what we're marketing. Once we're able to have that all wrapped up in a bow, and we're farther along in some of these than others, but they're always work in progress. Next is from an M&A standpoint, really expanding throughout the Southeast. We want to continue our Southeastern expansion. We want to continue to build out the de novo ancillary pieces, and look to get back to the growth that we were recognized for early on. As I said, starting out, I mean, really the growth of this platform to 55 plus site locations and 300 orthopedic providers and 1,700 employees all occurred within about a 18-month to 2-year time frame.
Wow.
And so we can move very quickly when that time comes. But right now we've been blessed, is the way I've come to terms with it, is we've been blessed that interest rates are where they are. We've been blessed that the market looks like it does, because that allows us to take a look in the mirror to say, what are we relying too heavily on a vision? And let's go ahead and put that vision into play and broaden our vision. And so that's where we are. I think I'm very, very excited about the future and about what the last 18 months have looked like for USOP.
That's exciting. It sounds like there's been explosive growth up until now, and there's more to come. Maybe we'll have to bring you back at a later date and give you so you can give us a recap of like what's transpired over that period of time. That'll be good. Before I let you go, I bring the show to a close with 2 questions. The first one is, tell us about a favorite book. Do you have a favorite book that you've read or one that you potentially reference every now and then?
Yeah. Have you ever read The Giver?
I don't think so. I don't believe so. I don't have that on my list.
Lois Lowry. I'm not sure. Maybe read it in seventh grade,
Yeah.
sixth grade, seventh grade. And there's a movie out now, but it just a fascinating book. A society that looks utopian throughout the books, revealed to be more of a dystopian type society. Everyone has their own job. Everyone's supposed to work within that job, and you're satisfied with that role. And then what happens when you decide to sort of move out of that or look broader and look at the larger picture? And it just a fascinating book, and something that's always stuck with me anytime I get that question. It's The Giver.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, it's reminds me of some other dystopian books I've read, like the Ready Player One, for
Yeah.
instance, sci-fi. Yeah, it's. I will say the movie was not as good as the book, but that's a story for another
As the
day.
page usually is.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Final question. This is typically where I turn the mic, so to speak, to you. What advice would you give to somebody in your position in this space? Um, it could be anything from advice to maybe a physician who's considering an acquisition, someone who's on the other side of an acquisition, someone who's managing M&A space, such as yourself. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think the from advice from being in my shoes, or going through this process, I think um, honesty it goes so much farther than um, I think we give it credit for at times, right? In the moment, you're again trying to balance, what does this future look like? What is the vision, and what do we have today from capabilities, and how are we selling our platform? And it really, the other side, going through an emotional process as well, is just looking for honesty, and empathy if you've been through sympathy, if not, but to go through that process in an honest and very transparent manner. And I would always say, look, at the end of the day, this is emotional, but it's a business decision for both sides. There are only going to be winners at the end of the day. And it doesn't matter the decision you choose. If you choose to go a different direction and stay independent, then you're a winner in your book for doing that. And if you decide to join, we consider you to be a winner from that standpoint. And but not to make it personal, just to be honest and transparent. That would be sort of the advice from my standpoint, and something that I've found has provided dividends as you work through the business transformation side, and you build those relationships that you built through M&A, and you're trying to grow the brand and bring the physicians on board. I think from the physician standpoint, I think private practice is the gold standard. It in an ideal world, we're able to get through the day and practice medicine if you're a physician, and you're able to do it at an income that you deserve, and that the challenges around you that continue to increase don't exist. But we don't live in that world, and as those challenges increase, I just find it is going to continue to be very stressful for the private practices that are, quote, smaller in size, to overcome or invest in all the add-ons that are needed to survive it today. And that could be, how do you compete in the AI world? That could be what does cyber security look like? We think of just the simple things, marketing, but it's how are you going to compete in all these different layers as you continue to add more cost on. So, again, those that can do it well can stay streamlined and efficient within their practice. From a private standpoint, I still contend that private practice will, always be the gold standard, but we have other options as well.
Yeah. I want to thank you for these valuable insights. And this is Graham Young from US Orthopaedic Partners. And thank you for joining us on the show today.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it, Daniel.
Thank you for joining us on the Healthcare CEO Show. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for more insights from the top. Until next time, lead boldly and care deeply. See you on the next episode.